one of the frames that comes up a lot is so-and-so isn't, doing what I want them to do, or I have to have this hard conversation with somebody. Most times people will try to have the conversation to make themselves feel better. But if we flip the question to what would I like to have happen, number one, and then number two, what increases the likelihood that occurs, you do a very different set of behaviors. So I'll give you an example. I had a friend of mine who's a pretty big influencer creator, whatever you want to call it. You would know they are. And she had basically a beef with a different creator who had like stolen some stuff or something like that. And so she was like, hey, what do you think I should say to this guy? And I was like, well, what do you want to have happen? And she like thought for a second and she didn't really have a clear answer. I was like, well, if I were you, I would want to decrease the likelihood this occurs in the future. Does that sound like a fair outcome? She was like, yeah. I was like, okay, well, does you yelling at him for it decrease the likelihood that occurs in the future? Or does he just do it and then he's just not friends with you? And she was like, huh. And what happens is oftentimes like you go through enough of those loops and you're like, maybe I just don't really gain anything from saying anything. I'm like, yeah, probably. And so I have an internal joke with my closest friend, Dr. Kashi, which is we call it the undefeated champion of the world, which is the third path, which is do nothing. And so many times, like when you run through all the scenarios, most of the times we just want to do something because we want to feel better. But it actually doesn't increase the likelihood that we want to have happens. Most times you'll just increase the likelihood for retaliation. And so me yelling at someone just increases the likelihood that they yell back at me or that they try to do something to counter control me. And so it's like, well, I would rather just like not play. This game has prizes and I don't want any of them.
When is the time to play?
When there's prizes you want to win and you think that there's a path that you have a high likelihood of winning them. My dad used to say this to me when I was really young, and I don't think I really fully grasped it until I was older. But he said, I don't play unless I know I can win. And I think part of it may be because he just didn't want to play games with me, who knows? But that sounds ugly. No, my dad's great. But the thing that I took that like later on, and I took that as like, one, many games are not worth playing. And two, if you are going to play a game, understand the players and understand the rules so that you can increase the likelihood that you win, right? And if you can come into a game saying like, well, obviously there's risk that's always involved. There's things that happen. But I think from the moniker perspective of like that saying, I think I've carried that with me. Like, why would I play unless I know there's a strong chance that I can win? And if I don't think there's a strong chance that I can win, how can I increase my odds? Like what unfair advantages can I create for myself? And if I don't know it, then I don't understand the game well enough, which means I probably shouldn't play until I understand it. When you play it out, it's like, no, it actually isn't awesome. Like the only way that you can really, quote, get back is that you would, win so big that you shrink them into irrelevance. And so I think like the real behind the success is the only revenge is that you just don't really think about them anymore. It's just not really a thing. Because if I actually thought about somebody every day, they won. Like they won. And so I balance or I hedge that against, if you want something out of life, then I am willing to burn whatever fuel I've got. And so I think a lot of people, so there's this boat, this seems like a non sequitur, but I'll wrap it around. There's this boat that I remember seeing in a harbor once, and it said, don't analyze your pleasures. And I thought that was a really interesting name for a boat, first off, but it was a really interesting phrase. And so I thought about that and I was like, well, don't analyze your fuel. Because I think a lot of people are, some people want to have passion, but like passion I think is very fleeting. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of overhead in doing the things that you want to do. If you want to get in shape, there's plenty of days you don't want to work out. Plenty of days you'd rather just eat cookies. Like there's overhead, right? There's things that you don't want to do, even if you like fitness. But if you need to use revenge as your fuel to become successful, which you want, then use it. And so if you don't have any of the positive, emotions, if you want to call it that, then use the negative ones, and then maybe we'll get to a point where you can use some positive ones. Because I remember I went to a performance coach years and years ago. It didn't last long, but I said, I feel like I have fuel. I said, but I feel like it burns dirty. Like, I feel like I can accomplish whatever I want. I was like, but I don't like the fuel that I use to get there. And she didn't really have a good answer for me, but That's why it didn't last very long. But even going through the process of asking the question made me think about it. And I was like, why do I say it burns dirty? Like, what about it does it affect in my life? And then I was like, well, is there a way that I can do the same behaviors I do when I'm, quote, angry about something when I'm not angry? And then over time, I was like, well, then I can just get rewarded from the activities and shift away from kind of the original catalyst for beginning the behavior set. And so I think there is some sort of kind of inertia that you have to overcome in the beginning. And that's why I recommend to people, just use whatever you got. You know, if you're ashamed, use that. If you're scared, use that. If you're anxious, use that. If you're angry, use that. Use whatever you have. But if doing it over time isn't getting what you want, then change so that you can get more of what you want. But like, the difficulty that I think some people have with my content is that I really have no judgment. So I don't pretend to have a moral high ground. I don't have, like, I'm just not going to judge someone on what they do. Like, if that's what works for you, do it. You know, if that's what's getting what you want out of life, amazing.